Welcome to The Inquisitor's Tale, Chapter 5, the second part of The Nun's Tale. The night before William left, he lay in his narrow bed in the dormitory staring into the darkness. The beds nearby were filled with boys snoring into the crooks of their arms. At the other end of the dormitory, the adults dreamt of rich food and friends from years gone by. Once William was sure that his neighbors were asleep, he eased himself out of his wooden cot until he was kneeling on the cold stone floor. He reached through a hole in his mattress into the hay. His hand closed around a belt. William lifted his robes above his waist. He unbuckled the leather belt he used to keep up his underwear. William slipped the belt that he had hidden in his mattress into the loops of his underwear. He hid his old leather belt in the mattress. He lay down again. He smiled to himself in the darkness. The next morning, William was given a donkey and 2 sacks of books for Abbot Hubert of Saint Denis. He began thumbing through a few of the titles: Isidore of Seville, an illuminated copy of the Rule of St. Benedict, St. Augustine's Confessions. Then, near the bottom of the first sack, William saw a strange book. It looked beat up and flimsy, as if not made in a monastery by some amateur hand. He began to reach for it, but the abbot, who was watching William carefully, stopped him. "Please don't dawdle, young William. You have a task ahead of you." William replaced the books, said farewell to the abbot, and then to his dear brother Jerome. "Keep studying, William," brother Jerome told him, "and be careful." William replied, "I will." "You will what?" said brother Jerome. William smiled. "I'll keep studying." Jerome burst out laughing. "He did indeed say that, the scamp." He shakes his white beard and sighs. The day was cold. The sky was as gray as wet wool, but William had never felt so free in his life. He could go anywhere, do anything. Yes, he would go where the abbot told him to and do what he had been asked, but there was no one to watch him, no one to tell him he was doing it wrong. It was his responsibility entirely. It was the most incredible feeling in the world. The donkey. William passed peasants working the abbot's fields and their little brown hovels lining the road. He wondered what their lives were like. He wondered how many of them were liars and loafers, as Bartholomew said. Unexpectedly, a door to a hut opened and a young woman emerged. A daughter of Eve, William thought. She was tall and her hair was thick and auburn, and the very sight of her made William feel strange. Perhaps Bartholomew was right. Perhaps she did possess satanic power. He hurried on to the forest of Malherbe. Nature has a way of warning you. Don't come here. Don't taste. Don't touch. Sometimes the warning is black and yellow stripes. Sometimes it's bared fangs. Sometimes, though, it is just a feeling that says, "Go away. You are not wanted here." The forest of Malherbe is like that. Dark as twilight, even in the middle of the day. The trees brood over you. The streams don't babble, they growl, and each call of an animal seems like a dire warning of imminent danger. You begin to notice the shadows. There are more than there should be, and they follow you. Next, you see the eyes, pink eyes staring from the darkness. It is when you see the eyes that you want to turn and flee, and indeed most everyone does, but not William. He pressed on. Frogs croaked aggressively at the young oblate. Each croaked like a curse. Large insects, like enormous walking sticks, were frozen on the trees. More than once, William walked into a spider's web and frantically shook the tiny invisible spiders from his dark, curly hair. As the forest warning became louder, more plangent and strident, William's buoyant mood shivered, quailed, and fled like a routed army from the field. The walking stick bugs grew even larger, some of them 4 feet in length. William put his arm around the donkey's neck. His neck quivered. Suddenly, the donkey stopped walking. William tried to drag the beast forward by its halter, but it would not budge. He would have dragged it along the path had he wanted to. He considered this. He put his hands on his hips. They fell to his sides. There were pale figures ahead of him on the road. Their shoulders were hunched, their fingers curled like claws. Darkness seemed to hover around their heads, and then the shadows emerged from the trees. A frigid sweat beaded up on William's forehead and under his arms. If Jerome had told the truth, and fiends had pink eyes and pale skin and evil wrinkled hearts, then these men and women surrounding William now were, without any question, fiends. They wore tattered rags. In their claw-like hands, many of them gripped hatchets and maces with spiked heads. A few carried short bows with quivers of arrows swung around across their backs, and darkness hovered around their heads. One of them, a stringy woman with a nose like a pig, stepped forward. The other fiends seemed to shrink from her. "I am the Wicked One," she announced, "and you will do what I say." Her voice sounded like breaking wood. William did not move. He did not speak. He just stood there. The trees creaked, though there was no wind. "Well," he replied after a moment, "what do you say?" "We'll start with whatever's in those sacks," the Wicked One snarled, pointing a crooked finger at the sacks of books. "Give them over." William sighed grandly. "Oh, the books. Sure," he laughed. "For a moment I was worried you were going to ask for my robes." He unfastened the 2 leather satchels from the donkey's back and tossed them into the dirt. The Wicked One, as she had called herself, stared at William suspiciously. "Why would we want your robes?" "No reason," William replied quickly, and then he looked away into the trees. The fiend grinned, showing off teeth as yellow and coarse as horns. "Well then, let's have your robes," she rasped. "Fine," William grumbled. "I guess you can have my robes." He began to pull them up over his head. "As long as you don't take my underwear." The Wicked One laughed harshly. "Why would we want your But then she stopped, for as William pulled up his robes past his midsection, she saw, holding up his underwear, a belt inlaid with looping whorls of gold. "He has an underwear belt of gold?" I exclaimed. "Does he not?" the nun replies, looking to Jerome. Jerome clasps his hands. "Indeed he does. Indeed he does. It's the only thing he has from his mother, crafted by the goldsmiths of Cordoba. It wasn't intended, of course, as an underwear belt, and he was not allowed to wear it at the monastery. He must have been thinking of that belt all along." Jerome smiled, shaking his head. "But what a dangerous idea." "What idea?" I ask. Instead of answering, Jerome turns back to the little nun. When the Wicked One saw the belt inlaid with gold, she cackled. "Ho, ho, now I see. Keep his treasures in his underwear, does he? Well, give it over." "Ah," said William, sighing, "but I can't do that. To be naked before a stranger is a sin." The Wicked One grinned. "Oh, you fools with your morals and your sins. It doesn't much matter. We were going to kill you anyway. We'll take your belt after you're dead." "Oh," said William, "I hadn't thought of that. In that case, instead of my underwear, what if I give you this?" William reached out and grabbed the heads of the 2 nearest fiends in his great palms, and he smashed their heads together with all his might, and they exploded like melons. Deep red blood erupted from the collision, spattering William's bare skin. For one instant, no one moved. The 2 fiends dropped headless to the earth. William was as surprised at the explosion as the rest of the fiends, but he collected himself enough to say, "Anyone else something from me?" The Wicked One's pink eyes stared. Then she opened her hideous mouth and screamed, "Kill him!" And the young fiends converged on the enormous, nearly naked young monk. William swung his mighty fist and a fiend's skull caved in on itself. He thrust out a leg like a horse would, straight back and connected with a fiend's stomach, pulping its organs. Another fiend swung a hatchet with both hands. William caught the hatchet by the handle, gripped the fiend's arm, and broke it. He grabbed another by its long, sinewy neck and began swinging it around, knocking others to the earth. Around and around the fiend went, screaming to the treetops of Malherbes. At last, William let go. The fiend flew over the heads of its comrades and smashed into a tree and then slid down, leaving a streaked bloodstain on the bruised bark. Finally, one last fiend ran straight at William. William punched him in the face so hard that the fiend's neck snapped straight back and he crumpled lifeless to the ground. Picture of the fight. The Wicked One. The fighting stopped. William stood in the center of the road, shoulders heaving, deep red blood splattered across his skin and face like war paint. Along the edges of the path, the fiends had fallen back, panting and staring. The Wicked One held an arm out to stop the assault. You are strong, the Wicked One rasped. Strong indeed, but may I ask, does your flesh repel arrows? Beside her, 3 fiends raised their short bows. Arrows knocked and aimed them at William's heart. William took a step back. On the ground behind him lay a thick mace. He began to slowly reach for it, keeping his eyes trained on the archers. And then he remembered the words of his abbot. No weapons, nothing but flesh and bone. William took a step back. The bowstrings creaked. Another step back. The bows could not be pulled tighter. William was up against the donkey now. Fire! The Wicked One screamed. Just as she did, William reached down and grabbed the donkey's leg and yanked it as hard as he could. The beast's leg was torn clean off its body, which sounds utterly horrific, but you will be glad to know that the donkey did not feel a thing. It just stood there gazing into the trees. Quick as a flash of lightning, William whipped the leg around, though arrows thudded into the donkey's flesh. The fiends were stunned. The donkey hobbled away placidly on 3 legs to crop the ferns at the edge of the road. William swung the donkey's 4th leg above his head and advanced on the fiends, brandishing his weapon of flesh and bone. Instantly, William was upon the fiend, swinging the leg like an enormous club. He smashed it across the rightmost archer and sent him careening into the other 2. Fiends closed around him again, and soon all anyone could see was a bristling mass of bodies and weapons, and donkey's leg rising and falling in the regular splatter of bright red donkey blood and deep red fiend blood. Finally, the Wicked One stood alone in the midst of the path. William pulled the donkey's leg behind his head. He hesitated. Well, he said, what do you say now? But the Wicked One didn't say anything. She just turned and ran. So William stood there amidst the carnage of fiends, wearing only his underwear and his golden belt. He looked around, said a prayer for the souls of the dead, picked up the blood-spattered leather satchels, and finally walked over to the donkey. He pressed the donkey's leg to the place where it had once been. It reattached itself immediately. And then William wandered out of the forest of Malherbes, leading the contented donkey behind him, and they continued on their way to Saint Denis. Silence settles over the table. I say, that did not happen. The little nun shrugs. Indeed it did. He beat them to death with a donkey's leg? That's the craziest thing I ever heard, Marie puts it. I try to sound nonchalant when I turn to the old monk. Jerome, you're a man of God. Do you consider what William did a miracle? He shrugs. What else would you call it? Now I need to tread delicately. Does that mean you think he's a saint? Jerome rubs his white beard. Well, it takes a lifetime of miracles to be a saint, he says, and then it requires death. Yes, I say, it does. So we shall see when he dies, I suppose, Jerome concludes. If the king has his way, we may see rather soon. The innkeeper puts his hands on Jerome's thin shoulders and announces he's bringing another round of ale. There's a 3rd child, another boy, I say. Does anyone know about him? At a nearby table, a thick man with heavy jowls and rough hands stands up. His beard is dark and curly. He strides over to us. The 3rd child, as you call him? Jacob is his name. You know him? Why wouldn't I know him? Didn't he grow up in my village? Didn't he save my life a week ago? I know him. What's your name? My name? Aaron. I'm a butcher in Nogent-sur-Oise, the Jewish side of town. Please, I say, tell us about the boy. So he does. Now Ned is going to read chapter 6.